Good day and good evening, and welcome to Daily's Hangout stream with me, Caetsu Chaiji, but you can just call me Kai. Tonight, we are, as we sometimes do, I don't know why it's on Guild Test, doing most of the various daily roulettes. We're not doing mental roulette, because I can't bring any of you with me, certainly. But we're probably doing most of the roulettes. And given that recently it has come out that we're expecting a lot of changes to Black Mage in particular, I thought it would be interesting to play Black Mage, maybe quote-unquote one last time before they change it drastically. There's always the possibility that when the patch goes live, the changes don't actually go. Maybe they did change their mind. It's also possible that they've changed even more than what we know. For those that don't know anything about this, the story is as follows. On the recent live letter, as is tradition, Yoshi P of course shows some of the content coming as Black Mage. And it's always Black Mage, unless he's specifically showing something on a specific job. Now, the things we observed on that live letter is, first of all, the first thing I noticed is that he's a speed mage. Straight up, his Fire 3 cast time is 0.09, just straight from the hip, which means that he has a GCD of 2.21. So, that's one thing to consider. With that information, we've been able to, Black Mages have been able to unpack everything else we saw. Notably, Firestarter and Thundercloud no longer have timers. Their timers basically didn't matter originally. Genuinely, there would be situations where, you were just about to use Thunder, but that just ran out. Really awkward. And sometimes you'll be, about to do, a Transpose Fire 3 thing, just as it runs out. It can happen, but, in most situations, it's completely irrelevant of timers. But it makes sense that they don't have timers. I've actually suggested before that Thunderhead just shouldn't exist, and that Firestarter shouldn't have a timer. I have suggested that in my own videos as suggested improvements to Black Mage. Because they're so minor, they hardly change anything negative or positive. It's just small quality of life thing. Another thing, speaking of timers, is that the Astral Fire and Umbral Ice timers are gone in that live letter. Which is to say, when you enter Astral Fire, you're in Astral Fire until you choose not to be in Astral Fire, or until you die. What you've probably seen this being discussed as is in the Enochian timers gone, because most Black Mage mains refer to Astral Fire and Umbral Ice colloquially, as a combined unit, as the Enochian timer, because being in Astral Fire Umbral Ice enables Enochian, which is just a damage bonus. So it has a timer which would be equal to the Astral Fire and Umbral Ice timer. We can just use that single word. A lot of people do that. But broadly speaking, both buffs no longer have a timer, so Umbral Soul pausing the timer is going to be irrelevant because there is no timer. Next, it turns out that Flare Star, Fire 4, Blizzard 4, am I forgetting anything? Blizzard 4, Fire 4, and Flare Star definitely have their cast times massively reduced to 2 seconds, supposedly. The GCD is still 2.5, but basically it means that triple cast does not give you, doesn't give you an indirect DPS gain by skipping some cast time anymore, because the cast time is shorter than the GCD. This also means that cast attacks isn't a problem for these spells anymore. I don't believe we saw Flare being cast, but if Flare and Freeze have their cast times reduced as well, then the concept known as cast attacks, which you possibly may have seen me talk about in videos in the past, is it exists for if a healer casts a raise, it technically takes 8.1 seconds, not 8 seconds. And if a red mage hard casts of a thunder of arrow, they technically take 5.1 seconds, not 5 seconds flat. Things like that. But overall, cast attacks would be pretty much gone if Flare and Freeze also get their casts below 2.5 seconds with this change. They've also made various potency changes. For instance, Fire 3 and Blizzard 3 should be 290, and Fire 4 and Blizzard 4 should be 300 flat, and Flare Star should be jumping to a ludicrous 500 potency, which means it actually is 900 with Astral Fire 3, meaning it finally beats Xenoglossy, which is pretty funny when you think about it. There's also other things, such as the fact that Paradox, so Ice Paradox and Fire Paradox, no longer increase your Astral or Umbral Ice state. Meaning, Ice Paradox does not make you go from Umbral Ice 1 to 2, or 2 to 3, and Fire Paradox does not push you from 1 to 2 or 2 to 3 in Astral Fire. This is a little strange, because in the past this has stayed true, because that would mean that Paradox is an objective upgrade to Blizzard 1 and Fire 1. With this change, it's not. Whatever, I guess. I can kind of understand that, because if they remove the timer, that means that the optimal way to enter Astral Fire every time would have been Ice Paradox transpose Fire Paradox Fire 3, so that you get a 60% extra power Fire 3 instead of, hard casting a Fire 3 at 70% power. Basically, you spend 2 of your mobility options as you enter Astral Fire. By making this change, that's not the case, I guess. There's also, smaller things, but these are, the big name things, is the Enochian timer is gone. The spells with longer cast times don't have that anymore, for the most part. And Flare Star got a colossal potency boost, is the main things. The cast time reduction and the Enochian timer things are probably the biggest, rotationally impactful things. If they had just done one of them, it would have already been huge. But they do both. Now, whether both things stay, we'll have to wait and see. It'll be next week. We'll know Tuesday morning. But that's pretty much it. In regards to Umbral Soul, we saw on the live letter that Umbral Soul still just works the same way as it does now. That if you're not in combat, it maxes out your MP and maxes out your Umbral Ice and your Umbral Hearts. It just doesn't pause the timer because it isn't there. Oh yeah, ley line's duration has also been reduced to 20 seconds, and supposedly it is more potent. Hard to see. Will we lose our ability to drop Enochian? Guzzle, let me show you how to drop Enochian if you really need to. See this? With no timer, you can still do this. Boop. But yeah, that is going to be... I suppose you won't... there will be some awkwardness if you want to do a specific emote or something. Do you think new Black Mage changes invalidate your guide? Yes, it does. I have already thought about remaking it. With that said, hey Zaf, hey Effie, hey Ilana, hey Rust, hey Gazel, hey Mizunashi, hey Agent Monica, hey Ilya, hey Nox, hey Agony, hey Sally, hey Aerodel, hey Flo, hey Naomi, hey Eaterit, hey Rillian, hey Midichlorian, hey Seraph, hey Zyph, hey Milo, hey Saros, hey Silva, and hey Perrin. Hope you're all doing very well. To Zyph's question, do you think they will change Umbral Soul in any major way or remove it? I think they'll just leave it. Like, it's still helpful for essentially resetting after a fight. I'm going to stick to my guns and say Umbral Soul should still be learned at like level 15, in my opinion. I don't understand why it's learned at level 35. Like, why didn't they move it all the way to level 15? Like, I don't get that one. Oh, well, I get it kind of, but I also don't quite get it, because I feel like it makes perfect sense for them to just give it to you. It resolves a major weakness of Black Mage of having difficulty recovering between fights at low level. So just don't quite get why they don't realize that, or at least don't agree with that. I'll say Vince and Ocney, hope you're doing well. But yeah, I have thought about remaking my Black Mage guide, but I will of course have to figure out how it all works again. A thing that people have already figured out is that... So in the existing Black Mage optimal opener, which has like a strict spell speed requirement and stuff, you finish your initial Astral Fire with Despair because like you literally can't cast enough Fire Force in time. And then you Mana Font, which leads to you casting... Well, you will also cast... you will cast, I believe, 4 Fire Force in the first Astral Fire state, and then in the second Astral Fire state you'll cast 6, as usual. With these changes, meaning that there is no timer to worry about, means that you can just cast 5 Fire Force in the first Astral Fire state and just not have MP for Despair. And then just Mana Font. And then you can skip Paradox and cast 7 Fire Force. Like, that's an option. In that specific scenario, that is an option for your opener, which would mean that you get a combined 12 Fire Force, which means you can cast 2 Flare Stars in your opener. I was like, hey Haku and Strat, hope you're doing well. And yeah, I kind of agree with that, Strat, that I have said this before, that non-standard rotations, like, if you're mad that a non-standard rotation becomes obsolete or stops existing, like, it's in the name. Like, I can understand that it's frustrating to, like, get taken this thing you're having fun with away. Like, I'm not saying that you can't be frustrated by that. Like, I'm not saying you can't be frustrated about that. You absolutely can. I'm just saying that it's in the name, non-standard. So when the game moves on and then makes the non-standard thing no longer good, that shouldn't come as a surprise. Like, I'm just saying, like, all jobs technically have non-standard rotations. It's just that for most of them, they're bad. Right? Like, they're straight up bad. That's why you don't use them. But a few jobs, Black Mage, has non-standard rotations that are not bad. Also, Silver said adjustment to catch up to Pictomancer. I don't think that's it, because like I'm just saying, if they need, like, if the problem was that Black Mage is having trouble keeping up with Pictomancer, like, they just need to add potency buffs. Like, if that was the problem, they could just buff Black Mage. Like, they don't need to rework Black Mage to make it competitive with Pictomancer. The problem is, of course, that the place where it is least competitive with Pictomancer is in fights with downtime, and no one is really competitive with Pictomancer there. We've talked about this before. And, like, you'd have to rework Black Mage completely to make it, like, I don't know, make it so that when you cast Umbral Soul, it makes it so that you get like a stacking buff that when you finally cast an attack spell, you have like a huge damage bonus for 30 seconds or whatever, and each time you use Umbral Soul, it gets a little stronger so that Black Mage has like a giga benefit from downtime. Like, I don't know. Like, that's the level of things that you need, because any job to compete with a job that is basically designed for downtime is to give them design for downtime. Most jobs have things to use during downtime, but it's more like you're not completely screwed during downtime. Whereas Pictomancer is like the master of downtime. Like, that, it makes it really hard. But yeah, it is weird, and I am surprised that they made these changes. I'll say the video I have coming up about cursed changes to jobs, I'm expecting like 100 comments. Like, maybe there won't be 100 comments. I'm expecting a lot of comments that will be like, it doesn't matter what I put as the Black Mage change. What's coming on Tuesday, people will see as more cursed. It doesn't matter. Like, I'm guessing that a lot of players would have been like, yep, that sounds about right, if I just put the live letter as like the Black Mage change. Which I didn't. I thought of something more creative than that. Because it's funnier to add a cursed change that is actually creative. Yeah, I believe, Perrin, I believe what players generally say when we say that Summoner has nothing for downtime is that because Summoners burst, like, peaks with Bahamut and stuff, that just doing nothing between Bahamuts is not too bad. But, you know, like, that's exactly what I mean, that most jobs can turn a downtime section into a positive, quote-unquote, by being like, oh, well, I didn't need it anyway, and things like that. Whereas Pictomancer will just continue their rotation for like 12 seconds. But yeah, that's not that. Like, that's not what this is about. But with that said, in accordance with this particular stream, I thought, you know what? Did you know, by the way, did you know that the crafted Black Mage staff does not have spell speed on it? Did you know that the Valiamander Black Mage staff does not have spell speed on it? I don't actually know if the EX3 staff has spell speed on it, but I bought this. And realized that if I bought it yesterday, I might have been able to cap my weekly tomestones again in time. But then I also thought, I don't care. I remembered that I don't care. Incredible, right? The Extreme 3 has spell speed as secondary. Oh, okay, that's not too bad. You could just double spell speed meld it then. Yeah, that's true, Strat, but I already spent my books on a paladin weapon, so I couldn't buy the Black Mage. I feel also like that would have been a little much. I don't know if I'll play Black Mage enough to justify that. But that leads, of course, to what is planned for this stream. Imagine that, 18 minutes of me just talking about job changes on a stream about doing dailies. We'll get there eventually, however, eventually has arrived. So, if you'd like to join me for Expert Roulette, come on over to me. Let me write down some names, as I usually do. Milo's making a second group. I respect the spicy topic stream. I try my best to keep these kinds of topics, like, you know, balanced, reasonable. It's not very interesting to just jump into a stream and then you just see, like, Kai being like, for 20 minutes. Mad, grr, herbity, herbity. Like, it's more interesting to actually have a discussion. No worries, Mizunashi. Pick a number between 1 and 4. Oh, I was also thinking 3. But that is also why I start by explaining what the problem is, or quote-unquote problem is, what is happening for those that don't know. Fishbread says, are you happy you'll never have to see me complaining about Flare Star anymore? I don't feel like you complained about Flare Star enough for me to find it annoying. But it is funny that it took this long for Flare Star to finally become the highest, like, all things considered, raw potency of Black Mage. But I feel like what it took was me putting it as a fun fact in a video that I think I did, that Flare Star isn't even the strongest thing. Like, that's how it goes. That's what it takes. Got a little bit gummed up in how I wanted to do that. Another 10 potency to Xenoglossy. I mean, actually, this time around, Xenoglossy would need 20 more potency just to break even with Flare Star. So, maybe we got him this time. Not even, well, I have them. I just didn't use them for whatever reason. Yeah, I'll use one now. You're happy, Strat? Ow. It's a little difficult. It's been a while. I'm very happy now. Great. Also, Ghost Park. Of course it's Ghost Park. Yeah. I did not plan that very well, but at least I didn't get yoinked. I didn't even get to throw my Flare Star. I believe so, Eaterit. I believe what we're getting is when 7.2 lands, Uewata and the new dungeon will be an expert roulette, and the 3 initial ones will drop to level 100 roulette. You think the sprint into job mechanic will function in the gold saucer? Or the jog thing? Probably. But not in the, probably not in the jumping puzzles. Are you serious? You serious? Ow. Right in front of my ley lines. Right in my ley lines again, of course. It's fine. It's a targeting reticle. We all know that. Hey, cat. Hope you're doing well. I guess you could say that. We had a little bit of an introductory discussion on what the changes that are coming are probably going to be. No, I get the impression no one looked at the teacups. Because I didn't. Like, wait a minute, I was supposed to look at this. Oh well. Hey Steve, hope you're doing well. You're pretty much, Perrin. Maybe the original idea of why they changed Black Mage in this way is that they looked at the warriors and were like, well, they're happy. Surely Black Mages can enjoy that too, right? Right? Hey Brontom, hope you're doing well. Midichlorian says I look at the teacups so it makes no difference. Oh, the reason why I was like, no one looked at them is because the first 2 sets of teacups have predictable paths for the most part. So if you're actually looking at them, if you just know where they start, you don't even need to continue looking at them to know where they land. But, you know, you need to look at where they start, which I didn't. You know, there's a limit to what you can get done if you're not paying attention at all. How do you feel about the new changes? My perspective on it, as I think I mentioned earlier, meaning before you came, is that I can see there being potential to like play around with it, and I think it looks interesting, but I'm not a Black Mage main, so it makes perfect sense for me to go, ah, that's fun. Yeah, that could work, I guess. Like, I get that. Something that I'm actually pretty curious about is, and I'm sure the potencies will be adjusted so that it makes sense, but what I'm curious about is whether we will finally see a point where Flare Star ends up being kinda okay on single target. That would be funny. But yeah, as I've said, I said this, like I used to say this a million times whenever, like, in the majority of Endwalker, people kept coming in asking me, and I'm not saying this like that's a bad thing, but more like just an observation, that I was asked many times what I would want for changes for Dragoon, because we all knew that it was getting reworked somewhat. And every time, my perspective on it was like, broadly speaking, I mean, I can think up things that I think would be cool, but... Oh, whoops, I should not have done it like that. Let me just rewind that and get it right. That the ones that should really be asked are Dragoon mains, right? Which would mean not me. We'd have to know flare potency to really know. Yeah, exactly. That's also a thing that I mentioned, is that I don't know if flare's cast time is getting reduced, which would also make a huge difference in this comparison. Ha! I'm a genius! Oh, my fire starter's running out. Undercut the genius by doing that. Fantastic. That's perfectly in character for me. I nailed it. Oh, music. Yeah, flare at 3 seconds for 240 potency on single target is very unimpressive. Which is exactly what I mean, is that if flare, like maybe you can Strat, maybe you can spreadsheet that a bit. Just idea. We know that Fire 4 is going to be 300 potency, and Fire 3 is going to be 290, supposedly. And if Flare stays 240, knowing that Flare Star is 500 potency, what if Flare's cast time also becomes 2 seconds? Like, it's just as an idea, if Flare Star was 2 seconds, 2 seconds, 2 seconds, would that be competitive at all with, well, you know, 6 Fire 4s, I suppose, because technically you could start the Flare Star by, you know, going into Astral Fire, Paradox Fire 3, and then Flare Star if you wanted. Like, that's perfectly on the table too, I think. Hey Jojo, hope you're doing well. Is the feeling not changed? What do you mean, Brontom? You could also do 3x Fire 4 Paradox and then Flare Star. That is also a good point. That is like exactly, that's what I mean. Is there a path in which Flare suddenly matters on a single target? Yeah, the timers on your Astral Fire Umbral Ice will be gone. And simultaneously, the cast times on most spells have been reduced for Black Mage quite drastically. Oh, look. Did the other team beat us? Did they make it out faster than us? Perrin says, I wonder how the changes will affect play rate. I imagine a section of players will move over to Pictomans as a quote-unquote more complex caster. But it should also be more accessible for daunted players. I would say I've heard a lot of Black Mages start saying that they'll move to Red Mage. Because it's more complex. Which I am just saying that I would find that really funny. If suddenly Red Mage becomes insanely popular, regardless of whether it suddenly gets buffed, so it's suddenly really good. Like, people just play it because it's the complex caster job now, relatively speaking. Mizunashi says, because if you don't need to move much and Paradox potency is unchanged, then it's technically optimal to do 7 Fire 4 Despair Flare Star. No. It wouldn't be, Mizunashi. If Paradox stays unchanged, just to be clear, if Paradox's potency is unchanged, then it's 520. A 300 potency Fire 4 is 540, but Paradox gives you Fire Starter. And Fire 3 is 290. So you're basically trading 1 Fire 4 for 2 almost Fire 4s. And you can use that Fire Starter so that when you go out of Umbral Ice, when you have to re-enter, you transpose Fire 3, which means that you're not actually trading that Fire 4 for 2 almost Fire 4s. You're trading it. You're trading it for an almost Fire 4 and essentially 90% more damage on. Well, actually, 70% more damage on your next Fire 3, which you're casting anyway. Which is worth it. It'll probably bump Paradox to be slightly better than Fire 4, as it is right now. Maybe. Anyway, let me just do this. If you would like to join me for high-level dungeons, come on over to me. I moved a little bit. Let's see. Writing down names. Just for anyone that, like, it's been a while since I did a Dailies Hangout stream. I write down the names of the people that were in the group. This looks perfect. This looks very edgy, is what it does. I write all the names down so that I don't like bring the same people over and over, so that as long as I can, we have different people coming in. So like I see some people like come over and then like they're too slow, and then they're too slow. Like I will get everyone in the group eventually. I feel like we will need a healer though in this group. Although you stuff. Hope you're doing well. He says, where are you in game? I'm at my house, which is on Louisoix on Chaos in EU at this address. And I'll also post it in the chat. Thank you. Is the elf over there? I agree, Mizunashi, as that's actually also something that I've been thinking about, is a potential thing that we might see happen when these changes go live, is I'm imagining that a lot of Black Mages will suggest that the attacks feel much less impactful. Because something that makes an attack feel more, like has more oomph, is the fact that you actually had to like charge up to unleash it. Like, if any of you have played Monster Hunter, imagine if Greatsword just like did the true charge slash, like the big mega finisher off the rip just immediately, with no like pomp or circumstance, just straight up off the rip, no charge, no nothing, just straight to smackdown. It would probably feel like whoa when you see the damage numbers right out the gate, but you would probably also reasonably quickly be like, it doesn't feel, it feels like something's missing here. Do warriors still lose immunity when their chain target of Holmgang dies? Yes. But they can target themselves. My tiny legs! Wait for me! But yeah, like basically what I imagine will happen is that when these changes come, I could imagine that a lot of players will find that the attacks feel less impactful. Even though, like, broadly speaking, the attacks like have been like, they're not that much different. It's just that they shoot faster, which means that it feels like there's less build-up. Instant cast, I guess. Oh, my polyglot. That's what I get for Foul having a cast time at this level. Look. No! Ah. Womp womp. I was gonna instant cast Fire 1. Sad Black Mage. With no swirlies. Lonely Black Mage with no swirlies. Thanks. Have a region. Stop whining. Uh-oh. I am in pain and I'm tanking things. Ow. This is what we call a very, very big... I'll just run back. I'll run it back. It's a very big pull. Agony says, man, I thought they fixed Homegang. I don't know if they're... it's a weird, janky mechanic. But it is I guess it makes sense. If Warrior was tank, you could go 3 Black Mages plus Warrior without problems. Maybe if we landed in a dungeon where the tank had Nascent Flash. Oh, whoops. I didn't look in front of me. Hey, Milo, you should probably run. Ah! At least I didn't die for it. Hey, yo, hope you're doing well. What dailies do you do? Yeah, basically, on these streams, we're doing roulettes. But if you're curious what kind of dailies you could do, there are tribe quests you can do. Actually, I can't it's a little awkward to... Whoops, speaking of awkward. This menu, timers under duty, shows you what you can do. With the various daily logouts shown. I'm leveling my Viper, now I do roulettes. That is a good idea. And speaking of leveling, I have multiple, but I have a Dawntrail up-to-date leveling guide on the channel, which involves making the most of the various dailies you can, if you need it. But you asked about what kind of dailies there are. That's the focus here. This boss is fun. I believe that's a tank buster. Oh. I was so confident that that was that it'll hit front and back. Uh-oh. Ow. This boss is fun when you're paying attention. Why does Shadowbringers to Dawntrail Society dailies give so much more XP? That's because they scale up to the maximum level of the appropriate expansion. So the Shadowbringers ones essentially give appropriate XP for up to level 80, whereas the Stormblood ones, for example, give appropriate XP for a job up to level 70, and the Heavensward ones give appropriate XP up to level 60. But when you're in the appropriate level range, the XP actually scales with your job's level. But that also means that if you do them at an arbitrary level, then it'll feel like the difference is crazy. The relative experience, is it that much different? I'm pretty sure that the Heavensward ones are, like, relatively speaking, as good. But maybe I remember that wrong. Ew. You know, the real awkward thing about something like Foul having a cast time in this level range is more so that you're used to it being instant at higher level. Like, it's one of those things where it only bothers because it's something you're used to that is suddenly different. Is Black Mage going to be stronger in 7.2, or is it just different playstyle? We don't know. Like, we straight up can't possibly know without, like, getting our fingers on it. Like, even if we've seen all the potencies and everything, we can't know for sure because, like, they might change the percentage boost on Enochian. So, it doesn't matter. So, we don't know. We can only do, like, work with what we can see, and what we can see is mostly, like, playstyle oriented. My guess, Jojo, is that if you noticed, before Shadowbringers, the expansions typically had had 2 combat tribes, whereas from Shadowbringers and onward, there's only 1. So maybe that's the reason why are you for real? Really? Bro. Man. I call shenanigans. Like, mega shenanigans. What is this? It could have landed on anyone. He's like, well, there's a targeting reticle right there. Ow. Skill issue. I call shenanigans. Mega shenanigans. Me am mad. Plays ley lines, but yeah, I should have just waited. I should have just held my ley lines until he did that thing. Yeah, do it again. I dare you. I mean, he's consistent. Like, I mean, like, you can't say he isn't consistent. Like, at least we can't fault him on that one. That's amazing. That's true, Mizunashi. Sorry, Mizushi. I don't know why I added the na all this time. Is it in your Discord name? Maybe it's all flowing together for me. Look! It's massive wood! Oh, there's the problem. We have Mizuchi and Mizunashi. That's what's confusing me. That's what's confusing me. Sorry about that. Sorry about that. It is fun. Actually, I have a fun fact about Temple of the Fist before I move on from that. That originally, when Blue Mages got access to level 70 content, as in they leveled up to 70. Temple of the Fists mobs, specifically Temple of the Fists mobs, most of them were immune to deep freeze from Ram's voice. This was fixed as a bug fix shortly after. But initially, they were just immune to deep freeze for no explainable reason. It's just, whatever. Yeah, exactly, oddly specific. It would have made more sense if it was like, I don't know, Snow Cloak or something, that, yeah, all the mobs are in, like, as in snow. Shocker, they're immune to deep freeze. But no, it's just randomly Temple of the Fist. Jose Lucifer, hope you're doing well. You come to offer a bid for Milo. Well, what are you, like, can I sell Milo? I don't think I can. I don't think that's how it works. 100 million gil for Milo. Well, I can't sell Milo, I don't think. That's a large sum of money. That said, if you'd like to join for leveling roulette, come on over to me. Oh, sorry, did I place myself right where you exited from? Time to run. Whoops. Well, if I have two here. I'm grabbing Rust if there's no one else that haven't been with me yet that steps forth. Jose Nimryu and Catfish Jr. Hope you're doing well. And yeah, Nimryu, that was quite something. I was actually very frustrated that they left so fast, because I felt like if you have like a group of 5, like I was not going to leave, and the presumably pre-made of 4 players, if they didn't leave, we would be 5. That's, in my experience, usually enough to motivate some players that like filter in to stay. But no, it's a big sad. Milo's making a group 2. Choop. Oh wow, Aishia scope. Hey, at least I have a instant Xenoglossy here. And Paradox.
Those things are pure malcontent. The residue of lives unfulfilled.
The door will not open. Any tips for M4S? That's a hard one. That's true, Gazel. I think I was thinking of foul, but you know what I mean. For M4S, I don't know if I can really give like much tips for it. I would say like just generally when learning a new fight, focus on yourself. See if you can understand the mechanics. Yeah, exactly, Strat. It's really hard to give advice on a savage fight, like on specific. It's the same as if someone comes in and goes, "Do you have any tips for insert job?" It's like, I don't know. Like, what kind of situation do you need advice for? Like that usually, like specifying helps a lot. Yeah, exactly, Gazel. I don't know, watch my guide, I guess. Like that's usually the best I can offer if like there's no specification, that's true. Beating my addiction to Final Fantasy XIV. Oh, that's a hard one as well. Narrowing widening witch hunt hurts my brain so bad. Oh yeah, when we were proccing that on stream, I think we spent at least a whole session of proccing on M4S just on that. So, I mean, the best I can say there is don't feel too bad about that. It is really difficult. Hey Patrick and Rob Gero, hope you're doing well. Yeah, the changes to Black Mage are very significant. It's pretty wide sweeping changes, you could say. Bruh. Always in my ley lines. Is this 2024? Yeah, that's the experience of sinking down, Strat. All those high-level Black Mages be like, oh yeah, Despair's instant now. Yeah, at level 100. The good news, Patrick, I guess, is that the changes are wide sweeping, but broadly speaking, all make the job easier. Like basically, if you play the job the way you play it right now, and then the patch drops, you will be able to do that with no major changes. But you'll probably be able to do better. Like, they're basically making things easier. That's, like, largely speaking what's happening. So that's at least a positive, I guess. Hey, Private Pretty, I am in fact giving it its last rites in that aspect. That is why we're playing Black Mage and not a different job on this stream. If it hadn't been that Black Mage had these changes, I might have just gone like, I'll just play something random today, or play random jobs. That's where the paradox problem starts. Yeah, I suppose. Although you can kind of work around it, so it's not too bad. But it is mildly annoying. Jojo says, what is the paradox problem? Before level 90, the way that your Astral Fire state works is that you'll cast Fire 4 like 3 to 4 times, and then you'll cast Fire 1, and then you'll cast Fire 4 3 to 4 times. Or 2 to 3 times, I suppose. But because Paradox is instant, the Astral Fire timer starts sooner. Which means that the second half of your Astral Fire state is stricter on the timer because the clock resets earlier in the GCD. Which is like, it's a little confusing, I suppose, but that is the paradox problem, quote unquote, which is in an interesting way also kind of a paradox. Hey Maova, hope you're doing well. It is major changes, but the things you have learned aren't entirely wasted. Like, if that's any consolation, the things you've learned are not wasted. In fact, if you've learned a lot about Black Mage in the past few weeks, you'll probably adapt very easily to these changes because things are getting easier. I'm glad to hear that, Prinny. Also a little concerned, because I'd hope more people knew. Oh, right, he does the shrapnel shell. Please not here. Please go the other way. Please go the other way. Oh, whew. Yeah, that is actually, that's also what I've thought about a bit, Patrick. I'm actually surprised that I haven't seen that specific quote being tossed around more in these times with these kinds of changes. Oh. Right, I didn't need that sweep cast anyway, it's fine. But yeah, that also no, but I think that's something that is what's causing a lot of the screams of agony, is that the job is getting easier. And a lot of people picked up Black Mage because they like the challenge. Like, you're not alone there, let's just say. Which is also to say why the reason is that when I look at it, I think, I mean, it could be, like, it'll be interesting to work around these new changes and see what we can do with it. But I'm not a Black Mage main, so I understand that many of the Black Mage mains are not happy. And that matters. Also, I just want to highlight something for some of you in the chat that might not know, but Strat is a Black Mage main as far as I know. So, like, I'm just saying, there's at least one person who likes to cook. That looks at it and goes, hey, I could cook more with this. Oh, hey, Bakash. Hope you're doing well.
Many faces have I worn, but this is my favorite by far. You will persist in this folly no longer.
Right. I planned badly.
The stage is set.
He's right. Probably not for all jobs, Patrick. Many of them are perfectly, whoops, I exited my fire there very early. Absent-mindedly. Many of my guides are still perfectly accurate, so I wouldn't remake those. But the jobs where, like, the rotation is very different now, like, for instance, Black Mage, I'm considering making some, like, remaking them. I don't know for sure if I will. But it is something that I am considering.
What a boorish audience you are!
Oh, right. Each time I put down ley lines, it's exactly when the boss is putting down something. Like, at this point, I can't be mad at the boss. It's actually my fault. I'm glad to hear that, Cody. Thank you. Maybe that's the true giveaway strat, that I'm not a Black Mage main, is that I don't do that. I'm not greedy enough. Jose Bits, hope you're doing well. And yeah, that is an interesting thing, Bits. And actually something that I feel like has come up more and more, which is also part of the reason why I put out a video very recently about skill expression, and a lot of people said, well, first of all, they said that I completely misinterpreted what skill expression is, while others said that skill expression is a very complicated term, and agreed that what I said can both be right and wrong depending on how you interpret it. But what was more interesting was that a lot of people were like, yeah, well, skill expression comes from like PvP games where you can tell the skill of someone by how they play around you. While simultaneously saying that skill expression does not require being like someone else to see it for it to be skill expression. Although the observation of the difference could be yourself being that person observing the skill expression. But an interesting thing that came up as a counterpoint to that was in a like the argument for why there isn't really skill expression, quote unquote, in Final Fantasy XIV is because there is an optimal way to do everything, especially in PvE context. So either you're doing it or you're not, right? Either you're playing optimally or you're not. That's not very like expressive of skill. Either you know how to do it or you don't. You could argue that's skillful expression, and you could argue that it isn't. Either you're doing the thing or you don't. A counter argument to that, when you switch the playing field to a PvP game, is the reason why skill expression is more prominently visible in a PvP game is because the skill expression comes in playing around what your opponent is doing. But if we take this same like super optimized outlook from PvE games and go, there's an optimal answer, and either you do it or you don't, you can actually take that exact same path into a PvP game and go, well, either you have the perfect counter or you don't. And it's not very skillful to not do that. So, like, the same kind of argument that makes it so that skill expression is non-existent in a PvE game, especially in MMO like this, where we are so focused on optimization, can be used to argue that there is also not skill expression in a PvP game. There is just knowing what to do and not knowing what to do. And at that point, we've basically deconstructed the statement skill expression so much that it's basically pointless. So we can either agree that skill expression is complicated, or we can make it meaningless. Like we can push it, we can optimize it to meaninglessness, essentially is what I'm getting at. And let's see. Let me just find my way back to how I landed at this. Knowing what to do can be some sort of skill expression. And removing avenues to demonstrate your skill, which is kind of what's happening, I feel is the bigger problem. But I feel like we can have skill expression in Final Fantasy XIV. It's just that because we're so focused on optimization, right? I'm finding my way back now. I'm coming back. Mind is coming back to where I was. There will always be an optimal way to do things. Always. And that means that the optimal way to play, for example, Black Mage, will be dictated by what does the most damage. It's not dictated by the developers unless they make sure that the best way to play it is the way they intend for you to play it, or they somehow remove the ability to play it in any other way. You could argue that a lot of jobs already are there. Like, for instance, some jobs don't really have any, like take something like Sage. Offensively speaking, just attack rotation wise, the Psych goes out on cooldown. Flemma goes out on the odd and the even minute, and the even minute use 2. Like, if we're maximizing damage, you're maintaining your dot perfectly. That's it. Like, that's it. Either you do that or you don't. It's not like, what's the skill expression there? The skill expression is mostly in how you respond to boss mechanics and what you do when things go wrong. But you can also say that it is skillful to play it optimally. But it's complicated is what I'm getting at. Is hit slash bouquet in front of Ultima as he Citadel busters you. But yeah, that is actually a good point, Patrick, because that was also something that I noticed that in the discussion of skill expression that I noticed, a lot of players were basically saying, no, that's not skill expression. This is skill expression, and then they described what is actually more like player expression. Where player expression, as I understand it, is more like the ability to be you, essentially play like you play, as opposed to play like is optimal. And for player expression to be really present, there has to be a lot of options that are evenly matched. You could, in a really, really vague sense, say that the player expression part of Final Fantasy XIV is choosing what job you're playing. But I feel like that, does that really count? And if that's it, if that's player expression, then that really underlines that there isn't any, like, much else. But yeah, exactly, Bits and others, that the problem is that if you're if you're playing a game where optimization is such a strong focus, then there, like, either you're doing the optimal thing or not. Mizuchi says, I think what you're describing is Black Mage to an extent. I don't think my fight timelines look much like other people's. Maybe, maybe not. Also, hey Shaq, hope you're doing well. The short version, the timers on Astral Fire and Umbral Ice are going away. The durations on Firestarter and Thunderhead are going away. The cast time of most of your spells are getting reduced. Ley lines will have a shorter duration. That's like the really short version of what's happening. Maova says, I think skill expression in a PvE environment is best illustrated in a Race to World First environment where rapid adaptation and their choice on how to approach an encounter are necessary. Yeah, in a way. But then, the skill expression is, I guess, very focused on adapting to the boss fight with the toolkit you've already mastered. But yeah. And this is also, in my opinion, part of where the skill expression argument falls apart a little bit, or the skill expression discussion at least, because a lot of players discuss boss fights and the complexity of a boss fight as if it's like a decided thing. How can I explain it? If it is objectively viewed that a fight is easy, then it is easy, first of all. Second of all, you just know how to do the mechanic, obviously. If you know what the mechanic is, you know how to deal with it. That's it. There is no such thing as having a hard time with the mechanic. You just do it. Just do it, Lamau. That's the problem. Like, and when we reach that point of perspective, then like, the average discussion kind of breaks down because the fights are not considered a complexity either. And yes, that is exaggeration in a way. Anyway, also, hey Yannick, hope you're doing well. And Citrus, hope you're doing well. Citrus says, if the skill expression in Final Fantasy XIV is adapting to the way the boss mechanics work, then shouldn't that mean certain classes are better for certain bosses? Or is it a matter of just DPS numbers nowadays? Certain jobs are better for certain bosses. It's just that, for the most part, jobs are balanced well enough that it doesn't matter. But exactly, certain jobs also have a harder time adapting to certain bosses. Like, we can do this for every DPS role, for instance, or some of them. Viper, just to take an example. Also, hey, Clove, hope you're doing well. Viper can stockpile essentially 10 plus seconds of just ranged attacks to just dodge if they need to. The closest you get to that is like, I mean, Monk can use Six-Sided Star and run away for 4 seconds. Ninja can use Raiton if they want to, but it doesn't give you that much and it comes at a cost in a way. Reaper can use Harvest Moon. Like, Viper has a much easier time dealing with mechanics where you have to step away. They can step away earlier so they don't have to play as risky. In the same way, Mages, Summoner has like less than 10 seconds every minute where it has to stand still, quote unquote, has to stand still, and just have to plan around that. Whereas a job like Black Mage currently is not exactly the opposite, but it's closer to the inverse of that. Like, they have a certain amount of time every minute they can move around, and they have to decide when they're doing that. Hey Leah, hope you're doing well. And yeah, that's also an interesting one, is that somehow these fights are suddenly way easier, question mark, because people have done them a lot. Anyway... Oh, now we reach the ones with more people, more spaces in them. If you'd like to join me for Trials Roulette, come on over to me. Alright, Mizunagi, enjoy your evening. I think I invited Naomi. Did Naomi not get the invite? I'll say Zip, Zap, and Phil. Hope you're doing well. That is... for the most part, Citrus, that's an exaggeration. I've explained this in some of my videos in the past. Some of the most hardcore players will choose to just bring the best jobs for a specific situation. And there are cases where a specific job is so much better than another job in a specific context that it becomes difficult to justify bringing the weaker one. Like, to give an example of this, Leah mentioned Uwu earlier, which is level 70 ultimate. In that level range, Summoner among mages has a really weirdly overpowered, like, toolkit. Like, for some reason it matures around that point, which means that it peaks very high relative to other mages and other jobs. So people would generally see it as, you should probably bring a summoner. Meanwhile, Black Mage is kinda at level 70, like, it's missing a lot of core tools, so it's kinda weak sauce at that level. So a lot of the time, you'll hear the joke that the way you play Black Mage in Uwu is that you don't play Black Mage in Uwu. You play Summoner. And your average balanced party will have one Mage. So you're probably not bringing Black Mage, if that's the case. You can have 2 mages, but most teams won't. But this kind of stuff can get a little exaggerated. A lot of discourse about, like, gaming discourse in general has a tendency to overreact on everything. Everything is either the best thing on the planet or garbage. There's no in between. Everything is either the peak new game or it's dead. So the best you can do when participating in such discussions, Citrus, is remember that most of the people participating in those discussions are exaggerating severely. So like take what they're saying and then like pull it through a filter of like, okay, they probably don't mean it like that, and see what it sounds like. So the important bit is for like 99% of the player base, if not even more than that, all jobs are viable. You can play whatever you want. If you reach the point where you're playing with the people where you can't play just any job, like suddenly some jobs are no longer good enough, you will be as sweaty as them and also not want to play the weaker jobs that are weaker by a smidge or whatever. Like, when you reach that point, you will also not care about that aspect. So I hope that helps. Oh, we have a reasonably balanced team. Perfectly balanced. Just 3 Black Mages. Enjoy, Citrus. I can also say that a lot of people have said that they appreciate that I have a reasonably balanced and reasonable outlook on these things. So it's also possible that I'm both underplaying things that are bigger problems than they are and overplaying problems that are smaller problems than they are. To like meet a middle ground. But yeah, you know, just the important part is things are not as bad as people make them out to be. Missing a Black Mage. Ah, yes, level 70, of course. Bum, 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 bum. Look, it's our best friend. It's our bestie. Hey, girl. Hey, Shaq. Hope you're doing well. I wasn't gonna make that. Yeah. I should have stepped a little further forward. Oh well. The sad ley lines. The sad ley lines. The sad ley lines. Thunder! Gazel says, would removing the potency reduction and casting Fire 3 in Ice or be Blizzard 3 in Fire bring any downside? Let's just say that it would be incredibly difficult to teach new sprouts that you shouldn't be casting Blizzard 3, Fire 3, 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 because it would be like less than 5% difference from just spamming Fire 1 and all that. Like, the optimal rotation would be so much closer to the, like, at level 50. To the Balance Mage rotation, as I've called it. So not necessarily a downside, but it would make things feel even less significant. It would make Transpose an indefensible ability to keep. Also that. It would probably make it so that a lot of things with Transpose would just be meaningless now. Although technically AF1 F3P standard would still be slightly more damage. It would be 40% more damage than using Fire 3 off the rip from Blizzard, from Umbral Ice. So it would still be a gain, it would just be even less. So like, broadly speaking, it wouldn't like negatively impact anything, it would just make the decisions you can make feel less significant. I had a feeling that was going to happen when we had two ley lines, like it was too tasty for the boss. Thank you. Yeah. You do be slamming. For some reason my brain went, he's gonna deep freeze. He didn't. He did the slidey. I don't know why I thought that. Yeah. Yeah, exactly, Strahd. It's either don't move or move a lot. Gazel says, I thought of that too, but seems like many players on JP Black Mage forums wanting that to be removed because it would make Transpose Instant V3 be the next damage gain after the 7.2 changes. Let me just run that back real quick, Gazel. JP Black Mages want the damage loss on fire spells from Umbral Ice and the damage loss on ice spells from Astral Fire removed because Transpose instant casting Blizzard 3 would be a damage gain in the 7.2 version of Black Mage. Am I getting that right? Am I understanding that right? This fight did include a lot of unfortunate skill expression. Because I can say that is true. That when 7.2 comes out, because all these spells are essentially like below the the GCD in cast time, using triple cast or swift cast on Fire 4 or Flare Star will no longer be a damage gain. Because, like, you don't save any time. But if you transpose into Ice and then cast Blizzard 3, it'll, you know, have its 3+ second cast time still. So instant casting that will be a DPS gain, because casting Blizzard 3 from Fire is a 30% less damage Blizzard 3, but if you transpose in Swift cast it, it's not 30% weaker. That's also the one of the reasons why we transpose Fire 3 when we have Firestarter. On the one hand, I can... Mizuchi says, I'm not sure which JP thread y'all are looking at, but a lot of JP players I've seen heavily dislike the Black Mage changes. Is it possible... Like, speaking of which, because Gazel can read Japanese. But Gazel is not, like, first language Japanese. And Gazel also has a tendency to sometimes miss a joke. Like, the whoosh moment. That's not meant as, like, a slight at Gazel, but more like a significant point to consider. Is it possible that those JP Black Mages Gazel are ironically suggesting that they also remove that damage loss effect? Because might as well do that while you're already deconstructing the job. Like, is it possible that there's a joke that got lost in translation? That's what I'm suggesting. Because if you translated what some of the EN Black Mages are saying, they are all, like, a lot of them are saying, thank you for removing the time on Astral Fire, I found it really hard to manage, and a big happy smiley face. But that's also ironic. Gazel says they assume Squeenix shortening Fire 4 and Flare Star because Squeenix wants people to only use triple cast, etc. for movement only. JP Forums people then say, if so, why not do it for Blizzard 3 too? If they truly want those tools for that. Well, it's complicated there, Prinny, because as I understand, they suggested we're going to prune some of the positionals on Viper, and then the player feedback was, don't do that. Which was why they went, okay, we won't. But then the problem there, quote unquote, the problem is that they basically waited so long with discussing what to do instead that they didn't have time to say, well, what if we remove Noxious Nash? Because players also went, no, don't do that, when they heard that Noxious Nash was getting removed. The problem, of course, is that they were a bit too fast on the trigger, maybe? But ultimately, if they had said, we were thinking about removing Noxious Nash, but we had also considered pruning some positional things on Viper, then the players that said, no, don't do that, would have been like, don't do either of those things. Like, they would, like, it's almost like anything they could have done to Viper, the people actively playing Viper would have said, no, leave it. You just gave us this. Let us try it. Right? So ultimately, the problem isn't about feedback, it's about the fact that they were a little too fast. Which is a little ironic with Viper, isn't it? But yeah, that does make more sense, Council. Basically, what is coming is, if they're making these changes anyway, then it feels unfinished, is what you're saying that the JP players are saying. And that is correct, Mizuchi. That is correct. That basically what I'm saying is the Viper example is not the best one, because that one in particular, they actually said that they had heard the feedback, and that's why they removed Noxious Nash instead. Like, in that particular instance, I'm pretty sure they outright stated that they had seen the feedback. So that is a bad example. There are other cases where we could point to it and say, generally speaking, when JP suggests changes and they don't happen, they say it's because they listen to the overseas people, like the Westerners, more. That's why we never get what we suggest. And the Westerners, us, are saying they don't listen to our feedback, they listen to the JP players more, when in reality they don't necessarily listen to either. Right? Couldn't they make a streamlined poll where players could respond to certain questions about possible changes to jobs they like playing? The problem there, Citrus, like the idea is good. The idea is good, but we've seen this in action. Let me put it like this. In old school RuneScape, they have polls like this, where they, like, before they add things, they like poll the player base, would you like us to add this thing? And it is very common, as I understand, that if they suggest an addition that would be cool for like PvP players, the PvE players will say no, not because they care, but rather because some will say no just because they don't like the PvP players, like basically screw you kind of mentality. And others will say no because they see it as, well, if they're working on this PvP thing for them, they're not making PvE stuff for me. So I'm going to say no to all PvP changes because I only want them to make PvE stuff because I don't want to play PvP. Meaning that people that have that shouldn't have a say, get a say, and they misuse it. In a similar fashion, if they made polls like that for Final Fantasy XIV, what would you need to do to be qualified to talk on changes for a job? I imagine Savage Raiders will say, well, you have to at least have completed the current Savage Raid tier to be able to. But that's not fair either, is it? And if the Savage Raiders just get their way every time, then it might not lead to a very fun experience for the non-Savage Raiders eventually. So it becomes really difficult to figure out what the process would be to figure out who should answer on these polls. We've also, like, back in Endwalker, I believe it was Synodic Scribe that made a video that, like, I actually reacted to it. It's the only time I've reacted to, like, some other content creator's video on this channel. But I got permission. I asked for permission. And got permission before I did. The long story short being that we can't look at Final Fantasy XIV like it's one whole player base that are all in agreement, because we're clearly not. Like, if you say, yesterday Final Fantasy XIV players said this, and now you say this, which is the opposite, the simple short answer to that is the players that said this are not the same players that said that. Two different halves. Like, for instance, a clear example of this is Stormblood. A lot of people hated Eureka. Shadowbringers comes out. The people that hated Eureka stopped talking about it because it's now optional. The players that like Eureka still like Eureka. Bosha comes out. The players that hated Eureka, shocker, also hates Bosha. And some of the players that like Eureka think that Bosha is, like, weaker, so they don't like it either. But some players love Bosha. Once Endwalker comes out and Bosha is no longer, quote-unquote, pseudo-mandatory, the people that hate Bosha stop talking about it. But the key is, it's not the same people. But that also means that basically we can't agree on anything. We can't agree on anything. Case in point, for all the Black Mage mains saying, and I've legitimately seen players saying, all Black Mage mains agree that these coming changes suck. All Black Mages. Exaggeration. Some say this is going to be great. You might be able to say all Savage raiding Black Mages agree, and that's also not accurate. So you can keep going. A lot of Black Mages dislike the upcoming changes, but a lot of Black Mages like them. Prenny says, like, don't have qualifications before you can respond, but allow people to contextualize their answers based on how they interact with the game. Could you imagine how many people they would need to read through all that? Thank you, Erdil. That was really fast. Imagine how much manpower they would need to read through all those responses. Those are not true Scotsmen. I'll say monster. Hope you're doing well. But yeah, the conclusion of what I'm saying here, and also, hey, Pika Hoop, hope you're doing well as well. The conclusion of what I'm getting at here is, I actually understand why the developers have just, like, if they've straight up just gone, we don't want to hear it anymore. We're just not going to listen to player feedback. We're just going to do our own thing and then just not ask. Because it doesn't really matter what they do. If they change anything, some players will be mad. The players that will be happy will, broadly speaking, not say much because they're too busy enjoying the thing, but what the developers are going to receive is all the vitriol of the people that are mad about it. And that's it. It doesn't matter what they do. The feedback will be negative. And I can say for myself, like the thing is, a negative response feels a lot bigger than a lot of positive responses. So, like my advice to you, by the way, if you want to, if you leave comments on a YouTube video, not necessarily mine, don't write an insult to the content creator. Just in general, don't do that. Just in general. Don't be a jerk. But I'm just saying, if you are a jerk in your comment, right out the gate, there's a much higher chance that the person is not going to read it. And not only that, they might not read a bunch of other comments because they can't deal with that. Don't insult at all, Yannick. Don't even, just don't leave an insult. Be respectful. Even if you disagree, I will say there are things on the internet that require an aggressive response. Just gonna put that out there. There are exceptions. But broadly speaking, keep the discussion about board. Don't go attacking people. Because you would probably like your comment to be seen and read and responded to. What if the insult is to remove the potato in your throat? Well, then it's a Danish person identifying a Swedish person. And then they'll just say you're being silly. Exactly, Agent Monica. And that's fair, Bits. My point is just that there's a reasonable chance that they'll have a hard time finding what people actually want without, actually reading what people are saying. Speaking of this game, let's do normal raids. If you'd like to join me, come on over to me. I'll see how many new phases want to join, and we'll see what we do. We have 3 additional ones and we only have 2 spaces. Does anyone that maybe have been along a couple times mind? Oh, Elana doesn't want to join then. In that case, we don't have to change anything. Fair enough. That's also true, Yannick. It is, however, still difficult because that can still run into the same kind of problem of if we limit it to content creators just for a second, how many, who was it that someone said, I feel like you, Kai, me, are the only content creator that isn't actively maining Black Mage that knows what the job is about. Like, if that's the case, then, you know, you could say, well, we want specifically Black Mage mains, but how many Black Mage mains do we have, like, that, like, cover different kinds of experiences of the game, right? I imagine a lot of the content creators that are, like, clearly Black Mage mains are doing the hard content as Black Mage, and things like that. And also that, Nox. A lot of content creators disagree on what they want, but they want the game to be. That is also a very good point. That is a very good point. We might run into a problem. We might also be fine. That's a good point, Bits. It's Citrus. This one hits the second, the player closest to the main tank. But other than that, we should be fine. Oh, right. No! Just take it straight, no problem. Yeah. It is difficult to say for certain Celia and Picaho, because I would say on the one hand there's the argument that last time they didn't change anything until like by the time it went live. On the other hand, last time I don't feel like the response was as aggressively negative as it was this time. So there could be an argument to be made that that maybe they might change course because of how aggressive the response is. Like, it's possible that they are suddenly changing course as a result of that. It's possible. I think I also led with this in this stream, that ultimately we can't know for sure until we actually see the changes go live. Until then, we can't be sure. We can assume that the things that have been presented are going to happen, but we can't know for sure until they basically do it. So, hey Peaches, hope you're doing well. Honestly, and this might be really, really weird, considering what we're discussing now, but what I'm always the most excited about with new patches is job changes. When we have a major patch come out, and there's no, like, and it's just potencies, I'm like, oh. Which is probably sounds weird. But it genuinely, it's like, by the time that I've had, like, a major patch for 4 months to play, I've kind of, like, had the fun I wanted with the jobs. And a major change to a job will make it more, quote-unquote, interesting for me. So I usually look forward to that. Like, the patch notes are probably coming on, like, Friday or Saturday, but they will not include job changes. So I'll be, like, scrolling through them and be like, all right, that, we knew that was going to happen, and then, like, maybe see one thing and, like, weird, I didn't expect that. And then Tuesday morning, the job changes will be there. And that's when I'm like, ooh, patch notes. That's what I want to know. That's what I think is interesting. Which I suppose is also an interesting point to consider. Like, I know this is like a really weird point, because a lot of players, like as we've discussed, a lot of Black Mages are happy with the jobs they have right now, right? Like, they're glad that the Black Mage is the way that it is, so it's really, really annoying for them that the job is getting changed. On the other hand, if there is a job that loves to cook, like the instant patch notes or any new discoveries there, all the Black Mages are in the kitchen cooking up some new strats with what they have. Like, before Despair Instant even was live, everyone had already figured out everything you could do with it and how much they could do with it from start to finish. Like that. So them basically, like, on the one hand, they're making the job a lot simpler. On the other hand, they're also making the job very different from what it was, which means that there is, quote-unquote, new things to cook. There are new things to cook with the things that we're expecting to happen. That is a fact. So you could argue that, like, actually Black Mages might be ultimately pretty well served by getting such a huge change. Now they have to figure things out again. Even if, like, they could even do that in, like, a month or two later, like, hotfix, and be like, actually, it doesn't seem like it's that good, so we're changing it back. That would give a lot of entertainment value for those Black Mages to sit there and cook on it, although it would be really annoying that now we've just figured out how to make it work, and now you're taking it back again? Also, hey, Shiran, Steelstorm, and Matthew, hope you're doing well. That's correct, Matthew. That's actually what it actually is. A lot of people just refer to Astral Fire and Umbral Ice as Enochian. What they mean when they say the Enochian time has gone is those two timers are gone. I suppose that's true, Mizuchi. Steelstorm says we don't need to look at the time anymore. Assuming the changes we've seen are coming as they are, then the Astral Fire and Umbral Ice timers are gone on Tuesday, Steelstorm. Like, straight up gone. Matthew says F1 is useless in the middle of fire forecasts. That would be the case, yes. And then at level 90 it turns into Paradox, which is worth using. Also, hey Matthew Park, hope you're doing well. Simpler could be replaced with Versatile. What with the less reliance on keeping timers spinning, it makes downtime less detrimental. The thing is, Matthew Park, that when downtime happens, Black Mage does this. The time is meaningless now because it's frozen. the level 35 skill is pointless? It's not. It still recovers MP and gives you Umbral Hearts for downtime. And Transpose will still be optimal to use Steel Storm. So both Umbral Soul and Transpose are still useful in this new world we're going into. Actually, you heard it here first. Before I say it, let me just point out that the fact Summoner is considered one of, if not the easiest DPS job, leads to a lot of players basically playing Summoner terribly. Because it's the easy job, so why would I need to look up anything? So they'll do really dumb stuff like legitimately not realize they need to summon their Kabi to do anything and just spam Ruin. Or always start with Ifrit, even though like there's a mobility section coming up or whatever. Like they'll just not think about how they can optimize the job at all, not even consider it, because Summoner is quote-unquote easy. I'm calling it now, with Black Mage getting easier, simpler, quote-unquote. People will start to talk about that. People will make jokes about Black Mage being as easy or even easier, exaggeration is king of course, than Summoner, and then people will start to play Black Mage and they'll play it stupidly because it's easy. How hard could it possibly be? And they'll do, well, all the weird things they're already doing, but they'll defend it quote-unquote more easily because, well, who cares? It's the easy job. Well, how does it matter? So I'm just saying, if we suddenly see a massive increase in terrible Black Mages, I called it. Now, with that said, yeah, exactly, Perrin. Of course they are. If you'd like to join me for Alliance Raid Roulette, come on over to me. I'm just checking how many we are. Yeah, of course they were, Perrin. People have already been saying that that Black Mage is basically healer rotation now. Caprev says, I still see lots of bad Black Mages on NA. Same, I'm just saying what's going to change is there's going to be more of them. And they're going to be even less likely to try and listen to reason. I don't know if you came up to join, Ilya, but you're close enough. Matthew Park says, here's a genuine question. Is the community as a whole asking for complex jobs, or is this more of a legacy player issue? There are players asking for more complex jobs. We won't be able to know for sure which ones are which. That's true, Steelstorm. The problem is that we've basically, like, I'm just let me try and explain. In Endwalker, that was exactly what the argument was. People were mad that Summoner got simplified, right? Some players said, well, it's a good thing that there is easier jobs for some players that don't want the big sweaty tryhard stuff. Then the players that liked old Summoner says, yeah, sure, I agree, but did it have to take my Summoner? Like, did you have to overwrite my complicated Summoner to get your quote-unquote simple Summoner? Couldn't we have had both? Like, one doesn't have to replace the other. And at this point, that argument starts to fall a bit apart because, well, we don't need all of them to be complex. Yeah, correct. But Summoner's right there, right? Like, if that's the argument, Summoner's right there. Why does it have to also be Black Mage? Like, that kind of argument. I'm not sure if Black Mage will actually be that simple, but people will exaggerate it. Absolutely. Say Ian, hope you're doing well. Imagine another summoner subclass with a third book for old summoner. That would actually be pretty funny. It would be really weird, but it would be really funny. Varg says whatever they're planning for job reworks in 8.0, if the Umbral Soul change was a precursor to these Black Mage changes, God, I hope they're more transparent for whatever they have planned. Yeah, also, hey, AA, and Varg, hope you're doing well. What I've suggested a little bit is maybe, and this is like a huge maybe, just to be clear, big fat maybe the reason that they're simplifying so many jobs, quote unquote, leading up to 8.0 is to make space for something else. Like, maybe they're making it so that jobs have way more, like, interaction in a boss fight. Like, maybe they have more capacity to, like, affect enemies so that, like, it's actually bad if, like, your entire rotation, like, it takes your entire focus to do just your basic rotation because they're giving you something else, like, something more. But, like, that's, like, giga copium because we have no evidence to suggest that they're doing that. But I mean, it's a possibility, it's a chance, it could be the case that they're like, we have to simplify these jobs because the thing we have in mind for 8.0 is crazy complicated. They could just wait until 8.0 to change the jobs, if that were the case. I agree, Prini. I agree with that. That is kind of true. Like, they didn't have to change it now. What can they do for Scholar at 110? I mean... what they'll do, Brontome, like, if we take a second to assume that they're not, like, changing the job significantly... right? Then, like, they'll do what they've done for many jobs. They'll just, like, shuffle something in under an existing action. Like, Warrior got 2 new actions in Dawntrail and 0 new buttons. Right? They got 2 new actions and 0 new buttons. Because they just put the buttons in under existing buttons. Boom. Bruh. Disappears right as my ley lines end. Oh, right. several pairs of pants. Warrior solos everything with 3 buttons. That is an extreme exaggeration, but I get what you're going for. Make it 4 buttons. I'm just saying, I would say I'm a pretty good source on what Warrior can solo and how they do it, considering how much I've soloed on Warrior. And yes, some duties Warrior completely meme on, but a lot of the time it's a lot more than like just 4 buttons. A lot of the time it's a lot more complicated than that. Did you know Warrior can solo taking out the trash? Oh, yeah, true. I believe so too, Cat. I have become tank. 7.2 dungeon needs to be harder because the 7.1 dungeon was soloable, or what? I believe there's something with buttons you need to stand on, Ilana. It needs to be harder so screeching on forums is even louder. This is actually a really good example of what I mean by, like, if we actually, like, we discussed this thing earlier about, like, polling what changes should be added to the game and whatnot. And that if we only ask one section of the player base what needs to be done, then it'll suck for the player base that isn't being asked. Like, this is exactly what I mean. That, like, if we only ask, like, the mega tryhards what needs to be done for dungeons, then all of the dungeons will basically be savage difficulty. Oh. Oh, I see, Phil. That does explain a lot. Mark says, the role being called magical ranged and not caster suggests magical melee could exist like Reaper sort of touched. Exactly. In fact, I remember, and I did mention, I'm pretty sure I mentioned this. Well, I guess not. I remember talking about the fact when Endwalker was, like, announced, and they were, like, teasing what it would be. I was suggesting that, like, I was leaning more towards, like, of all the ideas that people were coming up with for what the new job was going to be, assuming, you know, from existing jobs in other games, I was leaning more towards Templar exactly because that's a magic user with a scythe. Or it can use a scythe, at least. Because we were basically told it was using magic. And I was expecting it, that the melee would be this, right? Like that it would be magical. And like maybe they just change it to just say magical instead of magical ranged. But that's not quite what happened. Matthew Parks says if you ask the glam addicted, they would say make the dungeons easy, just make the drops look great. I'm sure they would also say that why do I need to, like, why can't I just choose the drops from the dungeon and things like that? Why do we have to do this song and dance of randomly rolling it? Why can't I just have the thing that I came for? Although in fairness, I think some Savage Raiders would say that too. Hey Custard, hope you're doing well. Yeah, I do agree. It's weird that you don't get like a guaranteed piece of loot at the end of at the end of basically max level dungeons. That is weird. Definitely. If you ask working adults with kids, I don't care. Just make it bearable in 12 minutes because the baby needs constant attention. You know, that might also, like, now that you mention that, this is probably this is going to be an exaggeration, right? Just preface with, this is going to be an exaggeration. But is it possible that MMOs, some MMOs at least, have leaned further towards being a little more lenient on the people's time? Like Final Fantasy 14? Because the target demographic, which is like MMO gamers from 20 years ago, for instance, are getting old. So, it makes no sense to make the games like super demanding and you need like basically to make it your life to be able to do it, because the people that are playing the game can't do that. Like they straight up can't do that. So like it's just stupid to try and like force it because it's not happening. I remember when Classic was the only choice. And yeah, I agree with that, Sally. Like the thing is, MMOs not being so aggressively demanding of your time is also like recognizing that in these days, it's completely absurd to assume that people will be willing to only play your one game. Like, with the sheer amount of options we have now. Which probably also impacts how to say the like the minimum requirement for a successful game, because an MMO from 20 years ago, like for instance, I actually heard this one recently. I think it was Josh Strive Hayes that said this, but something to the effect of if WoW Classic released like genuinely like now and not 20 years ago, it would probably not have survived, because that game just, like, it's not like a huge part of it. It's just, like, people, like, nostalgia factor, right? I optimize my DPS so the older folks in my static can tend to their lives. We should do that more. Like, that is funny. A lot of people that aren't, like, the classic that I've talked about in some of my videos of... there are other players present. It's disrespectful to not try your best. Not bring it. Counter argument. You should try your best to cover for the ones that can't. Do your best so that other players can relax. I feel like that's a sort of like a somewhat heartwarming perspective, don't you think? Like, could we somehow reach that point? Final Fantasy XIV. We optimize for the ones that can't. Hey Celestia, Siren Celestia, hope you're doing well. Good. We pump for those that cannot. Peaches says it's roots to suck at World of Warcraft is a great video essay by Folding Ideas. I know. I made a video called "It's Okay to Suck at Final Fantasy XIV." You may be wondering where I got the inspiration from. For those we have passed, for those we can yet pump. A great minds think alike. Matthew Park, my screen looks like this picture of an Enochian timer, so that they can so that they can look like this. Summoner Aether Gauge. Wait, that is a good video. And that was exactly like, I thought, that is interesting, because at least back then, like at some point in Endwalker, I truly believed that in Final Fantasy XIV, it's okay to be bad. But the more time has passed, the more I'm like, well, maybe not anymore. Like, more and more people are like, no, it's not okay. You need to be a pumper. Bruh. That's actually the thing is, for those, some of you may have watched my video that it's exactly that. It's okay to suck at Final Fantasy XIV. I actually spent a considerable amount of time in that video basically explaining that while yes, it is okay to suck at Final Fantasy XIV, you know what's not okay in Final Fantasy XIV? Intentionally being bad. Like the step from I'm bad but I'm trying to I'm bad and I don't care is where like it suddenly starts to be rude again. So yeah, indeed, exactly, Yannick. It's okay to be bad, but it's not okay to not do something about it. Like try, and that's also what I always say. I'm pretty sure I'm consistent in my videos about this. Trying your best. Trying your best. Pretty much, Nox and Clove. Sucking because you're learning is okay, sucking because you're ignorant is not. What if stuns were required for bosses? That's an interesting question, Custard. Custard first said, I want to see stuns work on dungeon bosses again. Would be a funny meme. And thank you, Aerodil. If stuns worked on bosses, Like actually hard bosses, there would be specific times where you would be expected to use them. And you would be the big suck lord or whatever if you didn't use them, or if you used them at the wrong times and now the diminishing returns are gone or whatever. What about sucking because my edible hit faster than I thought it would? Wow. Wow. And yeah, exactly, Gleaming. Because tanks have a stun in their role actions list, there is no such thing as not having a stun in a balanced party. And the thing is, if you make, like, this is actually something that I'm covering in a, not exactly this, but similar to this, is something that I'm covering in a future video, is the concept that right now we have certain aspects of the game that aren't useful in a boss fight. For instance, in your average boss fight, there's nothing to slow or bind. Like, straight up, there's nothing to slow or bind. Right? So that is irrelevant. There's nothing to stun. So that is irrelevant. Let's say that in M5S, like coming up like in a few weeks, that there is an ad that spawns that is stunnable, and it casts a spell. It's not interruptible, but you can stun it, so you stun it during that spell, so like delay it. Does that mean, if you really think about it, does that mean that stun is an option, or that stun is required? To me, that smells like stun is required. And by doing that, you haven't increased our options. You haven't added anything. You've just said you have to click the button on that. Depends on what the spell does. It kills a random player. It doesn't even have to do that. It does a raid wide. Silly. It does a raid wide. It's still required, because if you don't do it, you take unnecessary damage. Like, that's also the difference, is that, let me put it like this, and this is something that, like, some players have actually said that using tank LB on the transition in M4S is cheesing the mechanic. That's not cheesing it, that's using an option. If using your tank LB on anything where it isn't required is cheesing it, then what is the tank LB? The fact that that transition doesn't kill you just because you didn't use a tank LB means that you have the freedom to choose to use tank LB. Most groups don't, but they can. But if an enemy does something that requires you to do something specific, Sally says if it's going to kill someone, stun it. If it's just going to do damage, that would generally depend. Why? Your stun is an OGCT. And you're probably attacking that ad. So it wouldn't depend. Like, it genuinely wouldn't. Maybe if they removed all stuns and then gave you only GCT stuns, then it would be a DPS loss. And then it would be down to, well, can healers heal through it without it being a DPS loss? But, like, this is the kind of optimization we're reaching. But the particular example that I'm going with in that video, and I'm not going to get too detailed on it, but tenacity isn't needed anywhere. Which means that better damage increasing stats is better, right? If we had encounters come out in the game that did so much damage to the tank that tenacity was needed, that wouldn't increase your list of options. It just means that you need enough tenacity now. It would basically be like if they reintroduce an accuracy stat. You'd need enough that you can't miss, and then you don't care. If an enemy does enough damage that you need tenacity, then you need enough tenacity that that's no longer the case, and then you don't care. So adding, like, so basically, part of the problem is optimization itself, and there's not much we can do about it. There's an optimal answer. On a different note, I was thinking that we'll do Juno, but I'll be right back before we do that. In the meantime, sanity restored. Alright, I'm back. Hey Scaff, hope you're doing well. See, Matthew Park says, if all options are equal, they are not options at all. Actually, if we somehow reached this magical equilibrium where we actually had more than one option and they were all equal, like actually equal, that would be when we have options while optimizing. But because of how good gamers have become at optimizing, that's basically impossible. You have two options. One of them is 10% stronger than the other. Easy choice. There isn't a two options. There's one and a bad decision. You have two options. One of them is 1% better than the other. Easy. You pick the better one. At this point, you might actually pick the weaker one if it's easier to do it. But it's 1%. But some will choose the better one. Regardless. You have two options. One of them is 0.1% better than the other. Some people will pick the better one. You have two options. one of them is 0.01% better than the other. Some people will pick the better one. You see where I'm going with this? The worst part is that while we get this excessive with optimization, some people will also say that the alternative is basically useless dog water, when the difference is basically like zilch, nothing. So it's complicated, but the reason why we feel like there aren't options is because as long as we're trying to optimize games, you will find the best option. And then that's it. The only way you can ultimately land at something else is by choosing to not choose the best option. You need to find the guy, Perrin? There's a guy who only does floors 1 to 3 in a tier, doesn't ever get the weapon, and then attempts to get the highest rank possible. The highest rank possible on the last fight? What do you mean? Anyway, if you'd like to join me for Juno, come on over to me. On the first floor. Well, we have 8. That is pretty funny. But Perrin, that sounds like exactly what I was going with. Like I actually said that after you said you have a counterpoint. The only way you can exit this cycle of perfect optimization is to look at it and choose to ignore it. Or alternatively, never look for it. Like, the only way is to choose to not do it. Choose to not optimize. Choose to do it differently. Choose to do something weird. Exactly. Challenge runs. And the thing is, at some point, we'll just have to accept that that's also a thing in MMOs. Like, it's pretty funny. Back when FRU was, like, completely fresh off the presses, and people had this revelation about Pictomancer, and I started mentioning that, well, you know, just because Pictomancer is that strong doesn't mean that people can't, like, play the other jobs. That's, like, if Pictomancer is that strong, then, you like, people that want a challenge will just not use it. And some people then responded with, I don't want my main to be the quote-unquote challenge mode job. I don't want that. But you can see that people decided to challenge mode it anyway. But yeah, basically that's the best you can do, is just focus on having fun with the game. And like, eventually we will hopefully reach that sort of revelation or zen. Hey Caroline, hope you're doing well. Solo Black Mage Palace of the Dead might not be a challenge mode anymore. Maybe not. On the other hand, maybe solo Black Mage Palace of the Dead will be fun. And less painful. You know? Could be a good thing. If fun is in the pain, well, you can find, like, Caroline, you're not out of options. You can just run with Astrologian. You know? Everything is challenge mode if you're bad at the game. That's true. That's true. But genuinely, my point being that all this optimization reaches its zenith of either you keep doing it, or at some point on the way, at some point, you stop and go, wait a minute, I'm not having fun anymore. And then you just stop. But if you're having fun with it, then who's to stop you? Right? Delete that feature. Bit says, I'm actually on the other end. I dislike it when something I like is the easy thing or the strongest, because then people assume you're just meta chasing. I think the best you can do there, Bits, in the same way as ignoring the optimizing, is to ignore those kind of people. Matthew Park says, do you think like Magic Arena at the end of a dungeon you should be able to take that you have fun in this dungeon? You know, in a way, I feel like that would actually possibly be a better system than the commendation system. Like, wait, now that I think on it, that might be a better system than the commendation system. And I would add, because a big quote-unquote problem with the commendation system is this. Motivating you to do it. And give someone the commendation. I would say, imagine if you could replace commendations, essentially, with responding to whether you had fun or not in a dungeon 5 times. On the one hand, you could argue that that makes it really difficult to, like, know who's to blame for that, but like, just being able to say, yeah, I did, or no, I didn't, would be pretty handy and would be better data in a way. Like, if you have a lot of people have fun in the duties I'm in tags and badges of honor, that's pretty good. And that's true, Monster. That is exactly what happens. And players, gamers, have gotten so good at optimizing games that, like, to some degree, that they're finishing it quickly so they can play the next game. Which also makes sense. Filters, I feel like, did you have fun is too vague? Probably. They could probably make it, like, I'm just saying, workshop it. But I feel like that's actually better than the commendation system. And that's also true. It could be a comparative question that could possibly help. Hey, Eustache. Hope you're doing well.
Careful. That girl is stronger than she looks.
How about we start with a big fat knuckle sandwich?
Oh, that sounds delicious. the ability to commend multiple people.
Wait for it.
That reminds me of how in Monster Hunter Rise. Oh right, there was the follow-up donut. Whoops. You can like
Wait for it.
all of your like hunters that were with you, and I mean not everyone likes everyone, but largely speaking, as far as I know, people are very likely to like everyone unless someone was actually a jerk. Because it gives you stuff. Like, again, that's the problem, is that it, like, to make people interact with it, they kind of give it, like, some sort of payoff. And yeah, it does do something, Phil. In Rise, every time you get a certain number of, well, when you play with other players, you accumulate points. And if they liked you at the end of the hunt, you get more points. Especially if it's a mutual like. As in, if you liked them and they liked you, then you get even more points. And every time you get over a certain amount of points, the multiplayer cat will give you some free stuff. So it does do something. And again, that's kind of the problem, is that it makes it so that it feels a little bit like you're supposed to like everyone. Which kind of like removes the teeth from it entirely, right? And what's the point then? If you don't like everyone, then you're the jerk somehow? Which is actually exactly what Prinny also just said. That if you could commend everyone, then it seems kind of like mean to not commend everyone.
Wait for it. Wait for it. Wait for it. Auroral uppercut. Man, is that all? And I was just working up an appetite. This should do it.
Tipping culture, except everyone is a server. Yeah, and everyone is also eating at the establishment simultaneously.
Now we're having a party. Time to get serious. Wait for it. Wait for it. Bam! You can't stop the flood of mortal existence.
The flood of mortal existence.
I'm not done yet. This wasn't how it was supposed to go.
I've a bone to pick with this one. But first... the only way out is forward.
Hey Red, hope you're doing well.
Hey,
Do I make that kind of those kinds of videos?
go. We'll look after the girl. What is that? Is some kind of Tural Vitral? On your guard. I sense something up ahead. Something big.
Which is to say, I probably won't make a video specifically talking about JP murdering Black Mage in cold blood. I probably will not. The bagel attack. Yeah, I guess so. Wait, what did we decide was a bagel again? Donut and spread markers. Oh right, yeah, because a bagel is like a donut you put spread on. Does Kai have an opinion on the Black Mage changes? I've said that from my perspective, it looks interesting. You can do stuff with it. But I'm not a Black Mage main. You can still make it, Jojo. Fortunately, the option doesn't suddenly disappear. Oh boy, this is rough. You know what's really awkward about that one, Jojo? Is that on the one hand, there's an argument to be made that the Reaper has this negative gauge issue. On the other hand, maybe they don't see that because, you know, the 2-minute burst double enshroud might not be something they're actually thinking about. Because maybe there isn't a problem if you're using Gluttony on cooldown, for instance. Which isn't always something they're doing. Like, not always. So, like, it could be a thing where, like, the players can see it clearly that there's a problem, but as far as the developers are concerned, it's fine. Thank you, AE. I'm glad to hear that. Red says, personally, the removal of the Enochian time upkeep for me feels bad. I know it's probably a petty gaucherie, but thinking about the time was part of the fun for me. And yeah, I recognize that. And I think that's also true. Like, that hurts a lot for a lot of people. Like, they like the... That's the thing. Of all the changes to Black Mage, since at least Heavensward, when Fire 4 was introduced, even though they changed how Enochian has worked over the years, in Heavensward, managing that Astral Fire and Umbral Ice clock has been like a core aspect of the job. So suddenly being told, yeah, that's gone now. Just unceremoniously, on like just a new raid tier, not a new expansion or anything, feels like surprising. We can probably agree. So I get that. But yeah, to clarify, when I said do I make that kind of those kind of videos, it's more like what I would make would maybe discuss the pros and cons of the change. I would just make a new guide how to play it.
There's something about that big tower.
He says there's no gauge negativity on single enshrouds. You always have that one from Arcane Circle. Oh, I think maybe there's something we're missing then, because the gauge negativity that people are talking about, Leah, is over the course of an extended fight, where other jobs similar to Reaper basically gets 3 of their burst thingy per 2 minutes. Reaper gets just slightly less than that, which means that I think it's 8 or 10 minutes into the fight, that 2-minute loop, they only get 2 instead of 3. Which is like... right? Like, it's like, whatever. It's relatively small. But yeah, exactly. Jojo says that the breakpoint is at 10 minutes. Is that it's basically that all the other melee DPS get more than that, in a way. Whereas Reaper gets slightly less. But it's not a huge problem. Like, it's not a colossal problem, I guess, is the best way I can put it. But yeah, if you're playing a rotation where you're deliberately delaying a specific resource to burst, quote-unquote, optimally, then it starts to become difficult, because if that's not the intended way to play it,
You shall be consumed by the cowardice that binds you.
Exactly, Prini. I previously joked that Viper stole the additional gauge that Reaper's missing.
Rage cleaves.
Ow.
Cowardice dismembers.
Bruh.
You shall be smothered by the arrogance that consumes you.
It doesn't consume me. They're making so many assumptions about us in this fight. I'm not consumed by arrogance. In your arrogance. Yo, thank you, Custard. That's the arrogance talking. Oh. That's not fair. That's not fair. Either you're arrogant,
By the apathy that plagues.
or you refusing it means you're arrogant. Bruh. When did I miss a Fire 3? Apparently I did. Or Fire 4. Apparently I did. Weird. I didn't even... Oh, because the invulnerability ate my cast, of course.
Envy engulfs.
Bruh.
Cowardice dismembers.
Personally, I'm way too smart and humble to ever be consumed by arrogance. Skill issue. Oh yeah. Oh, that's a good one. Wow. I'm too smart and humble to be consumed by arrogance. That is so perfect.
You shall be consumed by the cowardice that binds you.
Oh man, I'm I'm so smart and humble. Arrogance could never get to me. Ever. Impossible. And yeah, that does sound right. Like the story is that these are like the representations of the shortcomings of the races of Final Fantasy XI. It's also just still funny that they are so accusing of us. Like, ow. The confidence over here. Me over here getting hit by a line and still choosing, nah, I'm pretty sure I nailed the distance from the other attack, so I won't die. I don't have to move.
Our next destination. No doubt a warm reception awaits us.
Because it says, how many players at minimum do you think this alliance rate needs at minimum?
What? Why only
There are like semi-frequent multi-stack markers on the final boss that I'm pretty sure will overwhelm 3 warriors. However, maybe if like they coordinated, maybe just having 1 warrior homegang it at a time, maybe that works. But then there's like the 3 spread out stack markers. I don't know if they are repeated. Shadow Lord is just a Galka who gave in to the rage that drives him. Oh. How's that heated it? Hope you're doing well.
I cannot die! Not until I have eradicated you and your kind from this world!
I mean, Osteik, I did read a little bit of like an explanation of the Shadow Lord, and I think the thing that is missing from that explanation is more that what it is that led him to be so mad. Like, that's the thing that's missing. But ultimately, him giving in to the rage that drives him is a pretty funny way to put it, and not entirely inaccurate based on what I understand. Like, to not be too spoilery, I believe a good way to put it is, while he did give in to the rage that drives him, he was somewhat justified in that. Like, it's like if someone says, "Why are you mad?" after someone has been trolling you all day for months. It's not quite what happened, but as I said, not too spoilery. Point being, he was treated so badly that it's probably somewhat reasonable that he is so mad. Hey, Goddessin! Hope you're doing well. What's your favorite alliance raid? Hey, Damaril and Alice. You're doing well. You know, that was really lucky. I looked at what half was the safe spot way too late.
The darkness within me shall devour you all!
But that is a good question. I'm not sure.
This insult, I will scour it away with your blood.
I stepped out of my ley lines. Boss moved. I forgot I had ley lines.
Darkness of oblivion. Your funeral dirge has begun. Its mournful notes sing of your demise.
It's been a long time since I've done this fight where I was playing a job that doesn't really have much to use against this. But favorite Alliance raid series is that's a hard question.
Behold, as the spate of my rage quenches the candle of your trivial existence. vaunted justice withstand the brunt of the deepest rancor and wrath?
Me just standing my ground, hoping that everyone saw that I put down ley lines. The true purpose of the Black Mage, it's the one that stays when you have to spread in all directions.
I will crush you like the insects you are! I will not fall. I will keep coming back until the fires of wrath consume me.
Oh boy. Oh boy. Nailed it. Whew. What if ley lines gave their benefits to anyone in your party standing on them? That would be really funny. It would be really funny. It would also be like, if let me put it like this: if Black Mage got that and they just did nothing else, like they changed nothing except that, then Black Mage would get a huge, like, basically a damage boost in terms of like raid DPS gain. But I think a lot of players would hate it. Alright, Jojo, enjoy your evening. But it is funny. Part of the reason why people would hate it if Leyline suddenly gave everyone a speed boost is because there's, like, for years at this point, there's been no such thing. So people would find it very annoying because they're used to being in full control of their own GCD and rotation. And suddenly someone comes in and messes with it. And also that, Red, it would definitely impact the game. Now 2-minute meta, haste would be top tier, I imagine. I don't know. I don't actually know, Phil. Because, again, a lot of jobs have so many OGCDs that it's like if you look at Warrior, for instance, getting a huge haste boost means what? you get more 1-3 combos, and eventually an extra Fell Cleave here and there, and eventually an extra Infuriate here and there. Like, you need a huge amount for it to actually really give you anything. You still get the inner release every minute, even if you have a lot of haste. So it doesn't add that much. But it is a case of, like, I have heard people say, well, if my job hates speed, does that mean that the haste that I can get in Eureka and Bolja is bad and I should avoid it? And the answer to that is no, because it's free. Like, the reason why jobs hate the stat is some of them get actively tripped up by it, but if you had the choice between crit or speed, then crit is better for most jobs. If you had the choice between haste or nothing, then haste is pretty good. Like, then it's actually fine. And with the Black Mage case, it would be like the haste or nothing would of course be, would you like a Black Mage or a Pictomancer, right? Would you like a haste buff or a smaller damage buff? Would, I suppose, be the hypothesis, right? And then you would probably choose the damage buff, and now we're back at ground zero. But the idea is, if the choice is between nothing or something, then unless this something actively makes you weaker, then it is like net fine. And the thing is, the jobs that are like, no, I hate speed because it messes with my weaves, is like, if it's that bad, you can play around it. The problem is, if you have speed as like actually speed, then choosing to quote-unquote play around it by like clipping your GZD just because, and things like that, then it means that you have essentially invested resources into having speed, and then you're not using it optimally. That's a problem. But if you have free haste would mean that if you just don't use it, then you're not, like, you're just not using it. So, like, it wouldn't be so bad. This was the point, that if you had as much speed that, like, if you got so much haste as Black Mage gets out of ley lines, you would quickly pass over a point where there's a possibility that it'll work out. Possibly. Imagine playing 2.5 warrior, and then your GZD gets dropped down to like 242 and just ruins your OGSD timing. I'm just saying, if we were talking ley lines levels, but yeah, Perrin, I see what you mean, like with the arrow, but I'm pretty sure the arrow was also like a crazy amount. But if it was 15%, right? Then you wouldn't go from 250 to 242. You would go from 250 to 212. Like, your GZD would go so fast that it's pretty clear that you're getting extra GZDs. Arrow was 10%, then it would get you from 250 to 225. As always, Summoner being the pinnacle of quote-unquote well-designed, benefits greatly from speed, so much so that the entire rotation desyncs and forces you to use your worst abilities more. I guess. What if haste increased your movement speed? That would be funny. And really silly for Black Mage. Like a huge, like really high mobility phase, they put down their ley lines and like they just sprint across the arena, and then they get like a quick like speed boost as they run across their ley lines, and then like when they have to run to the other side, they like use retrace to like get their ley lines into position so that they can speed boost the first bit faster. If ley lines could stack, would also be would be pretty funny. But let's just say things stacking with itself, especially if it has like a compounding effect of some sort, is often a problem. It makes me think of Monster Hunter World Gunlands has a pretty funny example of this. You don't need to really understand much about Monster Hunter to get this, I'll explain. In Monster Hunter World, specifically Iceborne, Gunlands, which is Lance Giga Shield. Actually, I'm pretty sure the shield is in the right hand because Monster Hunter lore, not important. Lance. Oh, right, the camera's mirrored. Never mind. Shield, huge lance that shoots explosions, Gunbreaker style. They can put a spike into the monster that does some damage when you do, and every time you unleash an explosion near it with your gun lance, this spike explodes for extra damage. Incidentally, each gun lance user can have one spike active at a time. But what if there were 4 gun lance users? Each of them puts a spike in the monster. Does your spike explode when the other gun lancers make their lance explode? Yes, which means that if you have 4 gun lances and they all put a spike in it, they all do 4 times explosions with the spikes. Which means that if you have a gun lance user, having 2 gun lance users is better. Having 3 gun lance users is even better, and having 4 is even better. Just because they have, like, inherent synergy with themselves. Which is really funny. Hey Emily, hope you're doing well. And also, hey Nereo, I think you came in early, but I hope you're doing well as well. But yeah, that can often get scary if you have like compounding effects that is like the thing scaling with itself. That can get really, really crazy. Imagine if the spike also exploded with zeros on this. That would be really funny. Just randomly gunlance a synergy with Switch Axe. But yeah, we got some dailies done. We even got a weekly done, technically, with Juno. Hey, Coco, we actually pretty much just finished. But I hope you're doing well, Coco. It wouldn't quite be that crazy, Custard, because the way that it would work, bringing out paint, the way that it would work, actually I need more, I think. The way that it would ultimately work most of the time is that you would have, you know, 100% speed, right? Then you have one ley line, which reduces it to 85%, because it reduces it by 15%. Then you take the 85%, and then you times that with another 85%, which leads to 72.25%. And then you take the 72%, 0.25 of course, and times that with 85%. Which leads to like 61.4125%. And like that's how you go down. Which means that there would be 3 ley lines. Which would mean... Would mean that with 6 ley lines, you would actually reach, from my quick estimate, whoa, 37.714951556%. Which would turn a 2.5 second GCD into 0.94. Which Leah also said. Yes. Sprint speed, well, I don't know how you would calculate it, Custard, because sprint is a 30% bonus. I don't know how ley lines would add. How's it, Lucas? Hope you're doing well. Yeah, also true. Supposedly, there is a hard-coded 1.5 second GCD, but, I'm pretty sure Yannick demonstrated recently in a Eureka Authors run that with a haste buff, they managed to get their GCD down to 1.49. So I don't actually know if this 1.5 is hard-coded still, or if it's like a weird exception. Because I believe it was on Viper. But yeah, hypothetically, what would happen, I'm guessing, because I don't actually know what would happen with GZDs, like, well, rather spells that have a cast time of more than 2.5. Would they, like, what would happen with Fire 4? Would the GZD go down to 1.5? And then the cast time would continue until it also hits 1.5? I don't know. It could also be specifically Deep Dungeon Haste, Yannick. What if each ley line gave 30%? I mean, if each ley line gave 30%, then it would just be 70% to the power of 6. What did you say, Leah? What did people call you insane for? But yeah, to your statement, Lucas Mildrum, the thing is, for a lot of Black Mage mains, the playing with the timer is what makes it complicated. So it's like, it's a thing to learn for them, for the mains. What do you mean, Custard? I don't know how you get to that. I don't know how you get to that number. $24.13 of what? That's not how it works, Custard. Let me try again. If you reduce the GZD by 30%, then it means you go 100% minus 30% equals 70%. And then if you add these together, because the way Final Fantasy XIV works is that these things are multiplicative, then it means that you say 70% times 70%, like if you have two of them. And then you put it together. Which would be, like, just to be clear, this is the same as 0.7. Parents, I think Leah is positing that because a 1.49 GCD is possible, the 1.5 limit is myth. That could be. It's also possible that that the quote-unquote hard coding is a limit that is one place, and then the 1.49 is not limited on that other place. But yeah, basically that would mean, Costa, that the way that you would calculate this is that you say 70% to the power, and then like I'm adding this hat because that's how you do it on a computer, 6. Alternatively, you write it as 70% with a little 6 up there. And if you had that, then that would be like 11%. 11.76%. Which would mean if the GCD went that low, you would be like working with something in the ballpark of a GCD of like 0.3, I think. But yeah, I hope that helps, Custard. Math is not easy. So for a sprint bonus of 30, well, the thing is, we don't know for sure, Custard, because the long story short is that movement speed bonuses don't stack. Like, they straight up don't stack. None of them. If you're a ninja, you run 10% faster. If you have Peloton on you, you run 20% faster instead. If you sprint, you run 30% faster instead. Because that I have a Mythbuster video where I demonstrate it. You can't, like, speed bonuses, like running speed bonuses don't stack. It'll just give you whatever's the greatest one. Which is to say, like, I'm not saying your hypothetical just doesn't get to exist. I'm just saying, I don't know. Like, if we said that ley lines also increased movement speed, how would that look? I don't know. Is it additive or multiplicative? I don't know. Prini says a speed up and a speed down mixes in interesting ways, though. That is true. Those get weird. But yeah, long story short is that movement speed buffs don't stack. For some reason. But now we also managed to have some math. Now, just reiterating one last time, what if ley lines multiplied movement speed? I mean, the best way you would be able to do that is if you, for instance, said that... I don't know how you would word that. The time between your steps when you run is reduced by 30%. That would mean that if you're sprinting, you're already running at 130% speed. But if you're trying to translate the activity of something into a speed increase like that, then you would say divide it by 70% in that context. Which would mean that, like, that ley line, this super ley line that, like, reduces GCD by 30% and also, like, affects your sprint in the same way would lead to, like, 185% more speed, like, instead of just 30%. The way that logic works is It makes more sense if you look at it in the context of something that you are doing on a timer. Like, for example, let's say you have a swing timer of 3 seconds. Welcome back, Mizunashi. If you have a swing time of straight 3 seconds, then reducing that by 10% means that you have a swing time of 2.7, which means you hit, you know, every 2.7. But how much faster is that? Well, if you say 3 divided by 0.9, is that right? No, that's not right. If divided by 2.7, you'll find that that's 111%, meaning that you're hitting 11% faster, even though your swing time is 10% shorter. That kind of logic. Now it starts to get a little confusing in the math. Move so fast it's like the ice from Shiva Extreme and you go into the wall. But with that said, let me just reiterate one last time before we finish this stream, because as I said near the start, there's also the possibility that the changes we've heard for Black Mage are not happening. I'm just reiterating, because it would be so typical that someone watches this stream bot in the future and they're like, well, nothing of this happened. As it stands at the moment of this stream, we have just the other day seen the live letter for 7.2. In that live letter, we saw that Black Mages, most of their casts have a cast time of 2 seconds baseline now, instead of whatever they used to be. Flare Star seems to have a potency of 500 now instead of 400. Ley Lines only lasts 20 seconds instead of 30 seconds. And the timer on Astral Fire and Umbral Ice is gone. Straight up gone. There's also other potency changes, and there's also the observation that Ice and Fire Paradox no longer increases your Astral Fire Umbral Ice state, supposedly. How many of these changes will hit live? Who's to say? Who knows? It's possible all of them will. It's possible that the developers decided, actually we changed our mind on that. We don't know until, like, on Tuesday. But we've discussed it. Some people are excited about it. Some people are scared about it. Some people hate it. Some people like it. But I'm thinking hopefully it'll end well. That's the best I can really do. But I think that'll be it for tonight. So if you enjoyed this particular stream, it helps me a lot if you leave a like on it here on YouTube. That tells the algorithm that this was an enjoyable stream and like other people enjoy it as well. So thank you so much in advance. And can he find his notes? If you'd like to be part of the Discord community server, there's a link in the chat right there. There you will find the weekly schedule where you can see what else is happening in the coming days. I usually update it Sunday or Monday. You can also see links to videos and streams when they come out in the announcement room where you will, well, you'll find them. You can also see the, you can also get a notification whenever I post these videos and stream links. If you grab the reminder role in the role assignments room, you will also get an extra one around 15 minutes before stream starts, so you can catch it right when we go live. And if you'd like to support the channel even more directly, you can become a member of the channel, you can gift memberships, you can use the super chat system, or if you don't like any of that, Adel posted a Ko-Fi link right there in the chat. It all helps support me and the channel directly so that I can focus on doing stuff like this with all of you. So thank you so much for the support. But that'll be all from me tonight. So good night, good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on where you are in the world, and I hope to see you all very soon. Bye bye!